Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kendrick. Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Hope your nerves are okay. Hope your anxiety is okay. I hope everybody is okay. We're not going to talk politics in this podcast. There has been far too much politic talk just throughout this year. So I'm going to just stay away from it. We're just going to talk football. Today I want to talk about some of the younger quarterbacks in the NFL. Two quarterbacks that concern me moving forward with how they have played this season. We're going to get into Thursday Night Football. Look ahead to the Packers and the 49ers. And then my final topic of the day, we're going to do my expectations versus reality for the entire NFL. I'm going to look at every single division, kind of look at what their expectations were heading into the season, at least from my vantage point, and then how the teams have actually panned out thus far now that we are about at halfway through the season. Anyways, so Tua had his debut against the Rams, and I was very, very excited for it. We've been waiting, we've been clamoring for this since Joe Burrow had his first start and we saw how good he looked. And then obviously his second start, and then his fourth start, and then we saw Justin Herbert, and we've seen him starting for the Chargers. He's looked outstanding, and Burrow's looked outstanding, and so the clock was ticking on when do we get to see Tua. And the Dolphins this season have actually been very, very surprising. They have I think their defense is number one in scoring. It's like tied for second or third on third down percentage. I mean, this team is good. Brian Flores is one of the Bill Belichick disciples that work. He can legitimately coach, and the Dolphins are a very, very well-coached team. And a lot of people were upset that they benched Fitzpatrick because they have a real chance to maybe make the playoffs. There's an extra playoff spot, and the Patriots aren't good, and the Jets are a disaster, and their only competition is the Bills. And the Bills will probably win the division, but Josh Allen, every single week, is looking worse and worse. They almost lost that game to New England if it wasn't for the fumble by Cam Newton. I think Cam Newton would have been able to drive down the field and score a touchdown. The Bills' defense still isn't good. Josh Allen, first 4 weeks of the season was outstanding. These last, 5 weeks, he has not looked the same. The Bills team hasn't looked the same. It's not the same dominance we saw them have earlier in the season. So I don't know. But a lot of people looked at the Dolphins and they said, hey, this could be the Dolphins' chance to make a playoff run. This could be the season they legitimately could win this division with Fitzpatrick. But what I said is that it's not about this season. It is about Tua. So Tua gets the start against the Rams, and he looked not impressive at all. He completed 54% of his passes for 93 yards, a touchdown, no picks. He did have a fumble, and the fumble did get recovered by the Rams. He did not look good. This game was about the Dolphins as a whole, and really just kind of the travel schedule of the Rams. I mean, the Rams have traveled the most, to this point, at least to that game, the Rams had traveled the most in the NFL. Again, you're going all the way over to the East Coast, and it was a game ripe for the pickings. It was a game ripe for the Rams to have an off day, and Jared Goff had a very, very off day. Turning the ball over every which way, fumbles, interceptions, it didn't matter. It was a whole team game. The Dolphins scored on offense, defense, special teams. Tua didn't need to do much. But even with that being said, I am very, very concerned with what I saw. Because Joe Burrow, his first game was against the Chargers, a healthier Chargers team. And Burrow didn't necessarily have impressive numbers, But the thing was, his team had a chance to win it in the fourth quarter. He moved the ball all day long. He consistently put his team in field goal range. He showed mobility, ran for a touchdown. He showed he had a control over the offense, and that he could actually move the ball against a really, really good Chargers defense. Tua didn't do any of that. He didn't move the ball. He wasn't putting his team in field goal range. He wasn't doing anything of that. His most impressive throw was the touchdown throw, and even then, I think the touchdown throw was kinda lucky. He threw a medicine ball to his receiver. It was an awkward catch, but Parker's great, and he was able to make it work. Or, I don't know, was it Parker or was it Williams who made the touchdown grab? I don't remember. All I remember is just with that throw, I just looked at it and I said, wow. That was a hell of a catch. And, I mean, I guess Tua put it in one of the only places the receiver could grab it, but the defender had a relatively good chance to get it himself. And I guess that's another thing to kind of harp on, is Tua's accuracy, I didn't see it. And whether it was because he's just a raw rookie and it's nerves, his first NFL start, whether it's because it's the Rams defense and the Rams defense has been better than people thought it would be heading into the season, that whole expectations versus reality thing, I don't know. But I do know this. The NFL used to give young quarterbacks a few years to figure it out, but those days appear to be over with. You need to get it. You need to show flashes as a rookie. In your second year, you need to have a pop. And then in the third year, you need to realistically be the second or the first best quarterback in your division, or the team is kinda over you and they're already planning on moving off of you. That's just kind of the way the league seems to be headed. And when I watched Tua against the Rams, I didn't see a single play where I said, oh wow, oh that's Tua. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Okay, so that it factor, the it factor was not there. Okay? It just wasn't. Let's be honest, it wasn't there. Joe Burrow, you saw he had it in his first NFL start. What he did to a good Chargers defense, that pass rush, that secondary, him being able to consistently move the football while getting hit repeatedly and knocked down to the ground, he looked like he had it. Justin Herbert went out against the Chiefs with like a 5-minute notice, and he threw 300 yards and looked incredible. He looked like he had it. Murray looked like he had it. Wentz had it. Dak had it. Russell had it. All these other quarterbacks come into the NFL and they look like they have it. I didn't see any of the it in Tua. And I'm not going to write off Tua. I'm not going to say he's going to be a bust, because even though the league is moving in this direction where these younger quarterbacks, we are only going to give them now, basically 2.5 years to look like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, or we're kind of done with them. While the NFL is moving in that direction, I still don't believe it. I don't believe that is the best way to do things. While I understand that the league is becoming more offensive, and I understand they're incorporating more college schemes, again, there are still these teams like the Jets. There are these teams that do not have good coordinators, they don't have good head coaches, they don't have good pieces around these players, and so Sam Darnold, who many quarterbacks in the NFL think is one of the most talented and one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, people think Sam Darnold's a bust. Because you look at the Jets, you see how terrible they are, you see how bad his numbers are, but then you need to just look at, dude, who's the head coach? Who is the offensive coordinator? What is he surrounded by? I will always go back to Jared Goff with the Rams his rookie year. Jeff Fisher almost ruined Jared Goff's career, because Jared Goff his rookie year looked like he looked like a high school quarterback. He didn't even look like a college quarterback. He looked so overwhelmed. It was a mess. And now you see what Jared Goff is, and yes, he's coming off of a very, very bad game against the Dolphins. I get that. But what we now know about Jared Goff with Sean McVay, first read, deep throws, Jared Goff's one of the best in the NFL. As soon as you do ask him to move off of his first read, he does start to struggle. He can throw it running left or right outside of the pocket. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL at that. You find that he does have a system that works for him. I am sure Tua has a system that works for him, but his comp coming into the NFL, a lot of people tried to say it was Russell Wilson because they're both smaller But that's not his comp, because Russell Wilson is one of the best athletes in the NFL. He came in with extreme mobility. Tua doesn't have that. The only guy in the NFL that really resembles Tua from a stature and the athleticism point of view is maybe Drew Brees. He's like the only guy who resembles him at all, because they're both about the same height, and they both have like the same amount of mobility. Drew Brees is one of the most accurate passers in NFL history. He's one of the best quarterbacks in general in NFL history. So if you're going to tell me that Tua can be that, okay, well then I guess he's going to work. And this is just, we'll just wait, figure it out. The Dolphins' offensive line isn't great. We'll just wait, see how things develop over time. But here's what the Dolphins need to look at. They're going to give Tua the rest of the season to start and either fail or succeed. The Texans are bad. The Dolphins have the Texans pick. If that pick is in the top 10, top 5, I'd be shocked if it was in the top 5, but I was dead wrong on the Texans this year. If it's in the top 5 and they have a realistic shot to draft a guy like Justin Fields or Trey Lance, Trevor Lawrence, he'll be gone. But if they have a chance to draft one of those guys, you gonna tell me they won't take that shot? That they won't just immediately cave and say, alright, we made a mistake. Washington did it with Dwayne Haskins. Arizona did it with Josh Rosen. You're gonna tell me they won't just cave and say, wrong guy, on to the next. I think there's a real possibility they do it, even though Tua was the number 5 overall pick. If he's not the guy, he's not the guy. And it seems like these franchises at this point, they just aren't about developing these players long term. They want you to hit early, and then they can work on refining you and getting you more experience and helping you then. But if you don't show you have it, if you don't show that 5 minutes before a game starts, you're sitting there thinking you're going to be the backup, that 5 minutes before it starts, you're told you're going to be the starter, and you can't go out there in your first start and throw 300 yards and throw a touchdown, a rushing touchdown, everything. If you can't show you can do that, the league's kind of done with you. And you can definitely blame guys like Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow or Mahomes or Lamar, and go back even further. You can look at Russell Wilson or Big Ben, Aaron Rodgers. These guys come out their first season starting and they look outstanding, and their teams have instant success. Like, if you can't do that anymore, the league's just kind of done with you. So I'm going to wait and see what's going on with Tua. I will give him 2-3 more games, and if he continues to look the same, there is there's going to be a real concern. There will be a real concern. He can't fall back on mobility. He has to rely all on his arm and his mental. And I'm not saying he can't do it, but the only guy to ever do it really is Drew Brees. That's not a lot of wiggle room. So speaking of Burrow though, Burrow is now the highest graded quarterback in his division by Pro Football Focus. Now, some people might want to go ahead and say, well, because Baker's there, and Baker's not very good, and Lamar Jackson, he's not that great either. I mean, you look at him, he's not really a quarterback, he's more of a runner than a thrower, and Big Ben, he's coming off of injury. Let's not make the excuses, and let's not pretend we don't see what we see. I said maybe a podcast or two ago, there is a real chance that next season, Joe Burrow is the best pure passer in his division. I think he's already better than Lamar. I think he's already better than Baker Mayfield. The only question would be, what about Big Ben? What happens with Big Ben? Well, after this past week, Joe Burrow is now the highest graded quarterback in his division. Now, I'm sure he and Ben are going to duke it out for it, and I'm sure Lamar at some point in time will probably attempt to re-enter this conversation. But Joe Burrow right now is it. He is the guy, and the Bengals have found their guy. What he did to Tennessee, first off, I think it's an indictment on Tennessee's defense. Now, they did trade for Desmond King, and I think it's going to be great for their secondary, but their pass rush still isn't good. even with Clowney, even with Beasley, who is more of an average pass rusher, if anything, maybe even a bit below average. The defensive line is nothing special, but they didn't get a hit on Burrow. They touched him a few times, but they didn't get a hit. He didn't get sacked, and the Bengals were doing it with 4 backup offensive linemen. That is an indictment against the Tennessee defense. So I don't know. I don't know who to give the credit to. It's like in situations like that, I'm like, okay, every single defense has been able to get to Burrow multiple times a game. He's the most hit, sacked quarterback next to Carson Wentz. For Tennessee to not be able to get him once is horrible. You can't say that's all Burrow, because every other defense has been able to get to him. It's only Tennessee that hasn't been able to, which is why I said I don't think Tennessee is a legitimate Super Bowl threat. Their defense just isn't good enough. But more to the point with Burrow, he's been outstanding this season. I think it's going to be between him and Justin Herbert to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, and I think if anyone would win it, I think it would be Joe Burrow, just simply because of the team he is on. People, they still look at Cincinnati and they're like, what is he really working with offensive line-wise, receiver-wise, all that stuff. I mean, all Herbert has is weapons. He has Henry, and he has the running backs, and he has the receivers. I think that they will dock him for that. And there's a real possibility here that the Bengals end up finishing the season with a better record than the Chargers, because the Chargers are just a mess. They can't finish games. Anthony Lynn, I think, is going to be fired. Because of this culture he's kind of cultivated with the team. I think he can coach, I really do, but all this team does is lose close games. They go conservative, Herbert is a rookie, he's gonna throw some interceptions, and they threw the game away against Denver when they had every chance to win it. I saw a probability meter on the Chargers winning that game. They were favored to win that game throughout the entire thing, and then all of a sudden in the fourth quarter it just collapsed. It was horrid to watch. I think there's a real chance Anthony Lynn gets fired. But with Burrow, Cincinnati, you guys got to do everything you can to protect him. You need to do everything you can to surround him. This next season, we don't know what Ben's going to be like. We don't know if Baker's still going to be there. And Lamar Jackson isn't getting any better as a passer. You guys are going to have the best pure quarterback in your division. Your defense has some talented players on it. Jesse Bates, one of the best safeties in the NFL. William Jackson, a good young corner. I know he's been a bit inconsistent and a bit banged up, so maybe they'll go ahead and re-sign him. Maybe they won't. I don't know what they'll do in that direction. But their defense plays hard. It's not great. It's not even necessarily good. It is a little bit below average, but it plays really, really hard. And it was able to shut out Tennessee for a very long time. And then on offense, they know how to draft players. Tyler Boyd, Higgins, those are 2 good, young receivers. AJ Green, he still showed that he has good hands. He's not the same burner that he used to be. I don't know how long they'll really keep AJ Green on the roster. I think there's a real chance they move off of him this coming off season and they don't re-sign him. I think he got franchise tagged this year. So I don't know what's going to happen there, but they have some good running backs. They need to fix the offensive line, get him a viable, good tight end. And when I look at the division, we're not really sure what Cleveland's going to be. We don't know who their quarterback's going to be this next season. But Cleveland has a lot of talent on it. I think this is going to be like the NFC West. This is going to be a division that's going to be very, very competitive. It's going to be tough. Every team is probably going to have a winning record of some sort or be close to 500. There will be no cakewalk games in this division. It will be competitive to the very end of the season. I think the Ravens, again, next season will be up there. Because they just, even if Lamar doesn't always play beautiful football, against really bad teams, they destroy them. And even against good teams, they can destroy them just because of their run game and how creative they can get on offense. But I think that the league is starting to figure out Lamar a bit more here. And that is kind of concerning, and I'll speak on that in the next subject. As for the Steelers, we don't know what Big Ben's going to look like. We just don't. He could hit that wall. He hasn't always been a workout warrior, hasn't always taken the best care of himself, so we don't know how he has aged. This season, I think he's looked better than I had imagined he would. We don't know what he's going to look like next year, and then again, the Browns. Is Baker going to be there? Will they have a new quarterback? No clue. The Bengals could be at least in position to maybe fight for a wild card spot. Maybe if they can surround Burrow with a bit more talent, fix that offensive lineup. If you like Zach Taylor, go ahead with him. If not, get him a good young head coach, a good offensive leaning coach most likely. Draft offensive lineman, get him a good tight end, build around him. This is the same thing for the Chargers too. Chargers? The Raiders? I don't know. Do you really believe in the Raiders? I don't know. Do you believe in the Broncos? I don't know. The Chargers, if they can just get a new head coach, get a better offensive line to protect Herbert, hey, he looks good right now. Imagine what he could do, and imagine the games they could win if they had a coach that wasn't coaching this kind of mentality in the team to where they lose all these close games. I'm not saying it's all Anthony Lynn's fault, but it's going to fall on his shoulders, and that's why I think they can move on from him. Hey, when you have the quarterback, when you find the guy, the next step is putting them in the best positions to succeed. The Chargers and the Bengals both need to do that as soon as possible. Anyways, coming up next, speaking of quarterbacks, there's two quarterbacks in the NFL that are really, really concerning to me watching them play. And for one of them, this has been going on now for probably 2 years. And their name and their talent seems to be bigger than the product they're actually putting out there on the field. I'm going to talk about that next.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment talked about Tua's debut and Joe Burrow. These two in the same draft class. Burrow's been an instant hit. Even Herbert, who was taken after both of these guys, has been an instant hit. Right now, we are all waiting for Tua. Burrow right now is the highest graded quarterback in his division. Right now. Tua, I don't even know if he would necessarily qualify, but his grade at the moment, not great. His QBR, not great. Through one performance, not great. And I don't judge quarterbacks based off of one game. I'm going to give Tua a few more games. But, given what I have seen from Burrow and Herbert, if he doesn't look even moderately better than he did against the Rams, I think there is real room for concern regarding Tua and his future moving forward. Because the Dolphins might go ahead and pull a Josh Rosen and move off of him immediately. So, in the last segment, I ended up giving away at least one of the quarterbacks I'm going to talk about in this segment, and it will be Lamar Jackson, because he's been very, very concerning to me, but he's the second quarterback I want to talk about. I have a much more pressing issue to get to regarding Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz on the season, here are his stats. He's thrown 1,900 yards, completing 58.4% of his passes, 12 touchdowns through the air, so 12 passing touchdowns, to 12 interceptions. And here's what's crazy, right? So his last game was against the Cowboys. The Cowboys are injury-riddled all over the place. They are not a good team. I said, their one legitimate win, really, is against the Giants. That's their one legitimate win, and they almost lost that game. Otherwise, they had their win against the Falcons that I think doesn't count. This should be a one-win team. They should be at the bottom of their division. They're not good anywhere. Defensively, horrible. Offense can't get it going until they're hopelessly behind. This is just not a good team. Whether it was with Dak or without Dak, it's just now even without Dak, their offense can't even get it going in the second half. This is just not a good team. And they went into the game with Ben DiNucci against Carson Wentz. And I thought the Eagles would mop the floor with them. I said Carson Wentz has 12 interceptions on the season. He had 4 total turnovers against the Cowboys. I think he had 2 interceptions and 2 lost fumbles. Carson Wentz this season has been an absolute turnover machine, and I just didn't see it coming. I didn't see him turning the ball over this way. I knew he liked to throw his interceptions. He kind of has a little bit of Phillip Rivers in him. He likes his turnovers, opens up a bakery every Sunday. Just serving them up. In this season especially, he has been so turnover prone and is ridiculous. Whether it's fumbling, interceptions, he has not looked the same. His QBR against the Cowboys, his quarterback efficiency rating, so this takes into account what he did with his legs, what he did with his arm, everything. His whole performance. He had a 29.6 against the Cowboys. Against a defense that is historically giving up points, that is historically giving up yards, and it is historically lacking effort. DeMarcus Lawrence, he looked like the best player on that Cowboys defense. I give it to him. DeMarcus Lawrence played hard and out of his mind. It's not his fault that they did that bad. His offense couldn't do anything. 4 turnovers. You spotted the Cowboys 4 extra possessions. They did nothing. Couldn't get a touchdown. And I guess that's kind of what to expect with Ben DiNucci being the quarterback. He does not look like an NFL quarterback. I think that was another Mike McCarthy kind of signing, because I think, he played with, he was a player under his brother or something. So I think that was kind of like a sympathy draft pick. You pick him late in the round just because he's a good kid and your brother knew him. He's not an NFL quarterback. Here's what's really, really concerning to me, though, about Carson Wentz, right? I gave you his quarterback rating, 29.6 against the Cowboys. Here is the quarterback rating of every other quarterback, and I'll tell you the name of the quarterback too. Kyle Allen had a 69.3. Kyler Murray had an 85. Wilson had an 85.7. Daniel Jones had a 63.7. Mayfield had a 64.4. Matt Ryan had an 88.5. The closest to Carson Wentz was Jared Goff, who had a 39.9. So Jared Goff's QBR was about 10 points higher than Carson Wentz. That originally was the lowest. And I think there's even the discussion to have about Jared Goff, because he is a really big system guy. I mean, he needs the system of Sean McVay to be successful. He needs protection. He needs everything to be right. And even then, he will still have these games where he is just not good. There's something about those 2016 quarterbacks, right? Jared Goff, Carson Wentz went 1-2. There's a real argument to be made. Dak Prescott is better than both of them. But that is very, very concerning to me. For the Cowboys defense, as bad as they are, and as lacking of motivation as they have had on film. We've seen the clips of Jalen Smith. We've seen, you have guys on the end around to Odell Beckham. They're not doing their assignment. They're basically tackling themselves and just running out of bounds. The effort just isn't there. Carson Wentz, 4 turnovers. And a QBR of 29.6. And a lot of people are blaming it because of the things around him, and I have been one of those people. I have said, you're taking away 4 of his starting 5 offensive linemen. Lane Johnson can't stay healthy. They lost 2 others to season-ending injuries. Jason Peters did come back, but then he got banged up. And then his receiving-wise, you finally get Reagor back. You get Deshaun Jackson back, but then he gets hurt immediately. Jeffrey has yet to play. His leading receiver is Travis Fulgham. His leading tight end is Richard Rodgers. It's not Ertz. It's not even Goddard. It's Richard Rodgers. And I think another one of the leading receivers is a former quarterback. I just can't remember his name at the moment. Greg Ward. Fulgham, the last 4 weeks, leads the NFL in receiving yards. This is what Carson Wentz is having to work with. And I give him credit for working with it. But when you look at his performance as a whole, Carson Wentz leads the NFL in turnover-worthy plays with 23. That is 10 more than any other quarterback in the NFL. I mean, he is a turnover waiting to happen. And even against the Cowboys, okay, so can I just say this, right? The hallmark of a good quarterback and of a good coach and a good offensive scheme and everything, offensive play calling, when your key starters get hurt, when you can't run the plays that you really want to anymore, the thing that happens is you change the game plan. If your offensive line all of a sudden is really, really bad, there's probably no more 5-step drops. Now it's a lot of bootlegs, and it's a lot of quick outs, and it's getting the ball out of the quarterback's hand really fast, right? If you no longer have any burners at receiver, you're not really asking anyone to run a go route. You're asking people to run intermediate, quick outs, curl routes, things like that, getting the ball again out of the quarterback's hands really quickly. Why does Carson Wentz keep going deep? I feel like, and this is just my own personal opinion, this is all me and just what I saw against the Cowboys. Okay? He doesn't have any burners on his team. Okay, and Jalen Reagor, he just came back. I don't think they were going to be asking him to run a whole bunch of fly patterns and everything. Why is it that Carson Wentz continuously goes deep? 2 of his big interceptions were on deeper passes, or at least the one that Trevon Diggs caught in the end zone was on a deep pass. Why does it feel like he continuously looks for the big play instead of taking what the defense gives him? Sometimes players get caught up in their own hype, and sometimes they get caught up in their contract, and they get caught up in the notion that they need to be spectacular, they need to validate their contract, they need to play outside of themselves. When the reason why you get the contract is because you have been playing your brand of football and your brand of football works. Now, Carson Wentz is not perfect. He's been injury prone in his career, banged up every single season. I think there's a weird stat out there. He started 3 of his first 4 NFL seasons. He started 5-6. His actual career record against winning teams is not good. He's never won a playoff game. He hasn't even been able to really make it to the playoffs. And then you see how Carson Wentz is playing this year. The Eagles somehow are in first place. And if they make it to the playoffs, it will be the easiest first round game. Whoever faces them is going to have a cakewalk, and it will be a bye week. By that point in time, maybe they'll be a bit healthier. Maybe they won't suffer any more injuries. I have no idea. But it does not look pretty. And Carson Wentz, when you get paid to be a franchise quarterback, you're getting paid to uplift and carry your team. And either you're telling me that the pieces around him are so bad that this is as high as he can uplift them, or Carson Wentz just isn't the guy, you know? I mean, is there a possibility he just might not be the guy? Yeah, he's big, he's strong, he's mobile, he has a wicked arm, but his decision making isn't great. He seems to want to go for the big play more often than not, rather than taking what the defense gives him and making the right play. I don't know. All the eye test says Carson Wentz should be good, but then when you look at the results, it has not been that. He had that one spectacular season, and other than that, he has been average to kind of below average, beating up on bad teams, losing to good teams. That has been Carson Wentz. The other quarterback that I'm very concerned with is Lamar Jackson. Now, I'm not out on Lamar Jackson. I'm not saying he's going to be a bust, but what I am saying is I think the ceiling of the Ravens might be lower than we thought. A lot of people thought that the Ravens last year would be, if anything, a good playoff team, right? You look at Lamar Jackson's rookie year, he uplifted the Ravens, took them to the playoffs. He didn't have a great game. He showed he's really, really raw as a passer. He's a great running threat, but it seemed like the Chargers kind of figured out how to neutralize it, and they put in more DBs, which meant more speed, less linebackers, and they were just able to control him. And the thing that they also showed is if you get up on the Ravens, if you're able to score and then make Lamar play from behind, they've always kind of showed, at least the NFL recipe is, when you're behind, you need to throw to take the lead, you cannot run to take the lead. So then year 2 comes around, and Lamar Jackson and the Ravens explode, and they're the most unstoppable team. They're 14-2, number 1 offense, like the number 2 defense, and they were number 1 in so many categories for offense. The only area of offense they were below average in was the passing game. But what Lamar Jackson complemented it with is he was number 1 in the NFL in touchdown passes. They had an offense that was ranked passing-wise in like the 20s, and yet he was number 1 in touchdown passes. So they made it work. It looked like they figured out a system to make it work with Lamar Jackson, and that this was going to be something they can run back year in and year out. And so then they come into this season, and yes, it was disappointing last year. They weren't able to close the season. They weren't able to actually win a playoff game once again. Tennessee blitzed them. It wasn't all Lamar Jackson's fault, but he is culpable. He came out and admitted they overlooked Tennessee. They didn't think they were real. And now you look at the Ravens this year, even though they're second in their division, do the Ravens look anything like they did last year? Not to me. In my opinion, they don't. Outside of their win against Cleveland, this team is very, very beatable. And it seems like what defensives have figured out with the Ravens is they are going to stack the box, and they're just going to ask Lamar, can you beat us with your arm? We're going to have our linebackers really play you. We're going to play to contain. We're going to make sure that your runs to the outside are for like 5 or 4 yards and not 10, not 15. You will not gash us for 50. And just, can you beat us with your arm? And what Lamar Jackson has shown is that you can't. That game against Pittsburgh, the Ravens dominated that game. And yet Lamar Jackson was turning the ball over uncharacteristically. He was throwing terrible picks, fumbling, trying to do too much. I think what Lamar has shown, actually this season, he has regressed as a passer. Okay, so actually, here I have the stats for you. So last year, the Ravens were the 27th ranked passing game. 27th ranked passing game. This year, they're 31st. They are a worse passing football team. Last year, they were number 1 in points. They were number 1 in first downs, number 1 in touchdown passes, the point differential, everything. Lamar Jackson and this team, they were just ridiculous. Their defense was ridiculous. The offense was clicking. And this season, the book is kind of out. They look to run first. Make Lamar Jackson throw it. His completion percentage is dipped. Everything has dipped. He does not look the same. Pro Football Focus has him ranked at the moment as like the 17th, 18th best quarterback in the NFL. Last year they had him as the 5th best. Now there's still time for him to turn it around. His rank could always climb. It is fluid. Every single week it does change. But thus far, what is the record? What are they, 5-2 now? I don't know. What is the record? I think it's 5-2. Through 7 games, he is the 17th, 18th best quarterback in the NFL. He has not looked the same. Defenses have started to figure him out. Make him throw the football. And even in some of these games, I mean, you can see it even in the play calling. It seems like they're trying to have him drop back more to be a passer, to be a pocket passer, when he's not that. He's not accurate enough. I don't think he has the patience for it. I think he wants to move too much. He wants to get out of trouble too quickly. And now their offensive line took a major hit. They lost Ronnie Stanley, which is terrible. He's been the best tackle in the NFL the last 2 seasons. You combine it all together, he has been the best tackle. Pro Football Focus said sometimes when they watch him, he makes pass blocking look easy. Like, he makes it look like just anyone should be able to go out there and pass block. He makes it look so easy. They just gave him a huge extension, and he's out for the year. That is a huge blow to their offensive line. I think they're going to move their right tackle, Orlando Brown, over to left tackle. I don't know. This Ravens team, when I look at them, I think Lamar can play. I think at the moment, he is probably the 3rd best quarterback in his division, and you can win with that, especially when you surround them with good pieces. I still think the Ravens are going to finish as a double-digit win team. I still think they'll be one of the best teams in the AFC, but I think their ceiling is low. Lamar Jackson is a front-runner. When the team is ahead, and they can run the football, and they can play their basic style of offense, the team looks good, and they run away with the victory. Bad teams, they humiliate them. Decent teams, they can usually beat them by 1 or 2 scores against the really good teams. it gets closer. But then the question is, who has the lead? At what point in the game do they have the lead? For whatever reason, the Ravens, even with Lamar being as limited a passer as he is, when they are down, they go to throwing. When I think, and I have said this before, I'm being consistent, I think the Ravens should just play their game. They should just continue to run the football. They shouldn't care if they're down by 1 score or 2 scores. Throwing the football will not get them back into the game. Lamar Jackson is not there, and hell, there is a chance he will never be there. Maybe he should go work with the Palmer brothers because they seem to have really fixed Josh Allen. Maybe he needs to go talk to them, work on his mechanics, get that fixed. At the moment, he's not that guy. You need to run the football with Lamar Jackson to have any chance, really, of winning games and coming back. And I guess that's kind of when that question comes up. How long can he do this? People like to bring up RG3, who's obviously his backup. RG3 was a better passer than Lamar Jackson, but had a great running element to his game. You combine the two, he was great. Offensive Rookie of the Year, carried Washington, but then the injuries just piled up to the point where he couldn't really see the field, and teams were afraid to take a chance on him because, do we really want to take a chance with a running quarterback? I don't know. The NFL fits Lamar Jackson now more than ever, but you still need to be able to throw it on the move, rolling to your left, throwing to your right. You need to be able to drop back and throw it. Lamar Jackson right now isn't the guy. And I would like to think one day he can be that guy. I like Lamar. I think the game is exciting with him in it. He is literally Michael Vick 2.0. But the NFL defenses seem to have figured him out. This Ravens team doesn't give off the same vibes of just unbeatable. They don't give off those vibes anymore. They look like a very, very beatable team. I'm not out on Lamar. I'm not saying he can't be the quarterback of the future for the Ravens. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I think at the moment, given where he is as a passer, this team has a ceiling, and I don't know if the ceiling is Super Bowl. Would you take the Ravens over the Chiefs right now? Would you take the Ravens over the Steelers right now? I don't know. Are you taking them over the Bucks? Are you taking them over the Seahawks or the Packers or the Saints or the Rams? Because a lot of these teams are either good against the run or good against the pass. The Packers are good against the pass, not great against the run. They could gear up to stop the run and just force Lamar to pass. Seattle, they're good against the run. Not good against the pass, but Lamar Jackson isn't great against the pass, and so on and so forth. I just think a lot of these teams are kind of geared up to stop what the Ravens do best. And Lamar Jackson doesn't have a second fastball right now to be able to counteract it. Maybe one day he can develop it. I don't know. I can't predict he's going to. I can't say he's going to. We would just have to see it. Anyways, coming up next, gonna look at some Thursday Night Football, and then my final topic of the day, expectations versus reality for the entire NFL. I'm gonna look at every single division, and I'm gonna look at how the teams are doing, look at how they've been performing. Has the division basically met our expectations, or did reality smack us in the face? That coming up in the final topic of the day.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment talked about two quarterbacks that are very concerning to me, Carson Wentz and Lamar Jackson. Both of their names are big. We see the ability of them on the field. Carson Wentz, obviously, I think at this point he's a better passer than Lamar Jackson. I think he's demonstrated that. The thing with Carson Wentz is, other than his second year, outside of his second year, he has not been the same player. He's been a turnover machine. He's just made erratic decisions. He's one of the more turnover-worthy play quarterbacks in the league. And Lamar Jackson, the thing that has been his ailment since the beginning of his NFL career, keep in mind we're only in his third season now, but since the beginning of his NFL career, it's been his passing. Year number 2, he took a big leap. But the passing game, when you really look at it, he led the league in passing touchdowns. They had the 27th ranked passing game as a whole. So it was a lot of short passes. I think he threw close to 4,000 yards, but didn't quite reach it. And then this season, their passing game is ranked 31st in the league, and the Ravens look beatable. The Eagles just look like a mess, and like they're gonna win this division with maybe 6 or 7 wins. It is just, I think it's time to be a little bit concerned about both these quarterbacks. For the Eagles, is Wentz the guy? Can you really rely on him? And then for Lamar Jackson, it is, what is his ceiling? You know, is this his ceiling? Is this as good of a passer as he's going to be? Or do they need to surround him with even better receivers? I have no idea. But nonetheless, so Thursday Night Football, Packers and Niners. Looking at this game, I think going into the season, most people would have assumed that the Niners were going to blow the Packers off the field, because the last 2 times these teams faced in this past season, it was not a competition in either. Green Bay was instantly overwhelmed. They kind of looked like a finesse football team. The 49ers were physical. They ran all over them. The defense was smothering, and Aaron Rodgers could not do anything to them in 2 games. I think if they had even faced a third time, it would have been the same. The Niners would have completely swept the Packers. This season it's a bit different because the 49ers are just completely just bombarded with injuries, and it hasn't been pretty. For the Packers, though, before I really get into the Niners, I want to talk about the Packers in this. So, the Packers this season, obviously, are at the top of their division. What are they now? They're 5-2, I believe. Top of their division. Aaron Rodgers is the second highest graded quarterback in the NFL by Pro Football Focus. This has been his comeback season, and there was all the noise about Aaron Rodgers and the Packers going into this season because Rodgers' play hasn't been the same over the past few years, and then they were looking at they'd probably draft Jordan Love, and then they did draft Jordan Love, and then all of a sudden Jordan Love wasn't really panning out. He couldn't even beat the backup. He's the third stringer. The teams usually try and make any excuse to make the guy they drafted in the first round, at least at bare minimum, be the backup. They try and find any excuse. They can't even come up with an excuse to put him there. He's the third stringer, so you have that concern. But in drafting Jordan Love, what they basically said was, we are not worried about this season. And they showed they weren't worried about this season with their next 2 draft picks. So after taking Jordan Love, who by the way they had to trade up in the draft to get, they then drafted A.J. Dillon, who is a throwback style running back, not really a pass catcher. He's a big, bulky, strong dude that I think they were hoping they could incorporate some kind of power running game. He is the third string running back. He's not better than Aaron Jones. Quite frankly, he's not better than Jamal Williams. They both fit the NFL nowadays better than A.J. Dillon does. I remember watching a Pro Football Focus clip when they drafted A.J. Dillon, and everybody at Pro Football Focus laughed. They couldn't believe the Packers drafted him. And then with their third pick, they drafted a blocking tight end who I think had 1 catch on the season, and then he got hurt, and he's gone for the entire season. They skipped out on drafting so many possible receivers. And while you can say it was because they really liked their receiving core, they liked Devontae Adams, of course, one of the best receivers in the NFL, but after that it was Allen Lazard, who I guess before his injury was actually showing he could be a legitimate number 2. He's a deep threat. He can take the top off. He was better than I think people expected, but then he got hurt. And then it was Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who I think is a 3rd or 4th receiver on any other team, and he's kind of their number 2. And then without Devontae Adams and Allen Lazard, he kind of became their number 1. And so it was him, and it was their tight end. I can't remember their tight end's name at the moment. I know it's Robert Tonyan. That became his two go-tos. Here are some of the receivers that the Packers didn't draft who so far have been hits in the NFL. Michael Pittman. Laviska Shenault, who I think is one of the biggest shocks of the draft. He has been excellent in Jacksonville. DJ Chark, D.D. Westbrook, if he can come back healthy, from his ankle injury that he got. I mean, that can be a really, really good receiving core. Chase Claypool. KJ Hamler. I mean, that's just 4 of them. And that's in order, by the way. All of those receivers were second-round picks. The Packers could have traded up to draft one of them, or they could have just flat-out picked one of them. But they didn't. They took a third-string quarterback, and a third-string running back, and a blocking tight end, who had 1 catch on the season. That is what the Packers did with Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers is doing what he's doing this season. Rodgers has thrown 1,900 yards, 20 touchdowns, 2 picks. Again, the number 2 rated quarterback by Pro Football Focus. And then, before the trading deadline, there's all this talk. The Packers are planning to trade for Will Fuller. They want Will Fuller. And then all of a sudden the trade deadline comes and goes, and there was no deal for Will Fuller. And it was because they couldn't figure out what kind of draft capital they wanted to part ways with. They didn't think it was worth it. Now, reports are the Texans wanted a number 1 or number 2 for Will Fuller, and for some teams it might not be worth it because he's a pulled hamstring away from missing like 5 games. It's the way it's been every single season. He's a great deep threat. He is a great number 2 receiver on any team. The problem is he can't stay healthy. He's going to remain on the Texans for the remainder of the season, and I guess we'll see what happens in the offseason, but even then, the Packers wouldn't even pull the trigger to get Rodgers a solid number 2 receiver because Lazard is still out. Adams did come back, but we don't know if he's going to even remain healthy for the remainder of the season. He always gets banged up. This is just, I think the Packers, they did 2 things. They failed the draft, and I think they failed Aaron Rodgers. I've already talked about how I think historically, when you look at Aaron Rodgers as a talent, and you look at the success the team has had, I already think they've kind of failed. 1 Super Bowl appearance with Aaron Rodgers is unacceptable because of the talent that he is. But then you look at what they didn't do in the draft. If they were willing to trade up for Jordan Love, right? I don't know. Maybe hindsight's 2020. If they knew by trading up for Jordan Love, they'd have their 3rd string quarterback this season, like would they have maybe traded up with the Vikings or somebody else and tried to jump in front of them to draft a guy like Justin Jefferson? I don't think they would have had a shot at CeeDee Lamb. I don't think they would have had a shot at Jerry Jeudy. I don't think they could have traded up for those guys. But could they have maybe traded up for Justin Jefferson, who has essentially been the number 1 or number 2 graded receiver by Pro Football Focus all year long? He's been amazing for the Vikings. He and Thielen, I mean, they do not miss Stephon Diggs. Maybe they miss his energy, but Justin Jefferson is outstanding. The Vikings have him. He's going to remain in that division. Aaron Rodgers is going to have to watch what he does to his defense twice a year for the next, until Aaron Rodgers retires, or at least maybe until he's out of Green Bay. I just think the Packers organization has done him such a disservice, especially for this season, because Aaron Rodgers has seemingly turned back the hands of time, and he's back to looking like Aaron Rodgers. And again, he's kind of doing it with 1 receiver. Tonyan has been a surprise at tight end. Valdez-Scantling is nice. I'm still waiting for Lazard to come back. The offensive line, I think a lot of people thought it'd take a big hit losing Brian Bulaga, I'm sorry. Losing him, it hasn't really. It's been one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. I think Pro Football Focus at one point had it ranked as the number 1 pass blocking offensive line. I don't know if it still is, but it's like top 5. So, I just think they could have done a lot more. They could have done a lot more for Aaron Rodgers this season, and they didn't. And against the Niners, I'm going to take the Packers to beat them because I just simply look at the Niners and I say, they're done this season. Jimmy Garoppolo's hurt again. George Kittle is hurt again. Deebo Samuel is getting nicked up again. They have multiple, I think they have like 13 players on IR or that are just at least hurt, that are on the injury report. I mean, this has not been the Niners season. And it all started basically game 1, game 2. You lose Nick Bosa and then you lose Solomon Thomas. Going into the season, you're placing guys on IR. Richard Sherman still hasn't seen the field. They trade away Quan Alexander. He just didn't pan out. Jimmy Garoppolo, he's in and out of the lineup. George Kittle, he's hurt, he's hurt, has a broken foot in his bone. He's set to miss like 8 weeks. I think this is just the Super Bowl hangover year for the Niners. It's just not working out. This is a lost season. All the talent on this team, so much of it returned to this year. They did have some deficiencies at wide receiver, but you thought that with Kyle Shanahan's play calling and the defense, they can make up for it, and it simply hasn't worked out that way. And I look at this Niners team and I think to myself, are they going to run this back with Jimmy Garoppolo? Like next season, are they going to run this back with him? Because I don't think so. I thought after the Super Bowl, they would look to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo because I watched how Kyle Shanahan called plays. You can watch certain teams call plays and you can tell what they think of their quarterback. When you need like a 3 first downs essentially to waste a team's timeouts, and your team, all they do is run it 3 straight times, getting like 1 to 2 yards a clip, and they don't get a first down, what they're telling you is they don't trust their quarterback to throw it. They would rather run the football and risk punting it away than put it in the quarterback's hands. I watched a game in which the Niners, I think, called 8 passing plays during the playoffs. Jimmy Garoppolo had 8 passing plays. They ran the ball for the rest of the time, and it worked to perfection. And then in the Super Bowl, they ran it, and then as soon as the game got closer, Shanahan panicked, he tried to put it in Garoppolo's hands, and he failed him. And in this season, once again, Garoppolo not looking great, he's getting banged up again, he has been injury prone his entire career, even in limited games, basically, he has had multiple injuries, and I just think Shanahan looks at it and says, Garoppolo, this is his ceiling. He is a turnover-prone quarterback, and we limit his throws already. He gets banged up, and I just think we can do better. And I think what they are going to do is they're going to look this offseason, and they're going to look at guys like Matt Ryan. I think they're going to look at guys like Kirk Cousins, guys that Kyle Shanahan likes, and that he has had real success with, guys who are healthier, who are not as injury-prone as Garoppolo. I think he's going to look at those guys, and I think he's going to try and move off of Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, will a team want to trade for him? I have no clue. The only team that really comes to my mind that would want to trade for Garoppolo is maybe the Patriots. Maybe Bill Belichick. Maybe Bill Belichick would want to take Jimmy Garoppolo back. But other than that, I can't really envision a scenario where a team wants to trade for him. I think the book is kind of out on Jimmy Garoppolo. He's more of a trailer than a tractor. Now, he's a nice trailer. This metaphor I use sometimes, the tractor is the thing that pulls the team, whereas the trailer is obviously going along for the ride. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is more trailer than tractor. Now, he's a nice trailer. He's a better built trailer. He's a bit more refined. They put some nice pieces on him. Like he moves a bit easier. He's not one of these older, slower, not as well made, rusty trailers. Like, he moves pretty decent. He doesn't always hold you back, but he's not the best, but he is better than average. And I think Bill Belichick would look at the opportunity to get him, and he'd probably jump at it. He didn't want to part with Jimmy Garoppolo in the first place. Remember, he wanted to part ways with Brady, and he wanted to keep Garoppolo. And I think what Bill Belichick would do is he'd look and see that Garoppolo still has some years on his deal. He's not making nearly as much as the top quarterbacks in the league at this point because of the way his contract was structured. And it'd be a thing of Bill Belichick could trade for him. You would then have your quarterback, and then he could focus on all the other areas of the team. He could focus on really looking for a top receiver. He could focus on getting some more defensive help and so on and so forth. But other than that, I just don't know where else he would go. But when I look at the Niners, I just think this is one of those really funky years. Some teams are just a bit more injury prone. People think of like the Eagles or the Chargers as teams that just perpetually get hurt. This year, the Niners are battling injuries at every single level of their team. I mean, well, what is it again? They have like 13 players either hurt or on IR. This has just not been their year. Torn ACLs and messed up knees and strains. Richard Sherman still hasn't seen the field. Both running backs hurt, top tight end hurt, receiving corps hurt. This is just not their year. So I would take the Packers to win the game. I think they'll win it convincingly. And I honestly think Nick Mullins, it might not be the worst idea for the Niners to go forward with Nick Mullins. I think Nick Mullins is pretty decent. I think you can do better, which is why I think, given Shanahan's history, I think he would look at a guy like Matt Ryan or a guy like Kirk Cousins as people to maybe eye and trade for. I don't think the Niners are going to be bad enough to get a top pick. Maybe they would be aggressive enough to trade a haul of picks to get a top quarterback in the draft, but I don't think so. So I would look at guys like Matt Ryan or Cousins to come available. And hell, they might shock us, and they might go ahead and grab another guy in free agency, maybe Sam Darnold. Maybe they'll try and trade for him. You could always look at Dak Prescott, Cam Newton, Mitch Trubisky. Maybe Kyle Shanahan will just shock us all. But other than that, I will take the Packers to outright win this game. Anyways, coming up next, final topic of the day, get into my expectations versus reality for the entire NFL. That coming up next, final topic of the day. Thank you for tuning in.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment talked about Thursday Night Football between the Niners and the Packers. I think the Packers will win. I really think that the only thing I'm going to be able to tell anything about really from this game, I think, will be the Packers. If the Packers can't win this game easily, then I think maybe it's a credit to just Kyle Shanahan, or maybe it is an indictment on the Packers because they have shown teams can run the football on them. They've shown to be maybe a little bit more of a finesse team, so maybe the 49ers can take advantage of it, but I just think the Packers will win the game. I think that the Green Bay organization has done Aaron Rodgers this season especially a disservice, not getting him another good young number 2 wide receiver, not giving him a solid number 2 next to Devontae Adams. And then as for the Niners, they're just beaten up and injured. Their quarterback, their tight end, their wide receivers, defensive line, running backs, everything. Everything is just beaten up for them. So this is kind of a lost year for this team. It is the Super Bowl hangover. So anyways, let's get into this. So my expectations versus reality. Going into the season, I had expectations for every single division and every single team. I don't really want to go team by team, because I'm going to be here forever doing it. So I'm going to kind of go by division. So we're going to start with the AFC and the AFC conference, and we will start with the AFC East. So the AFC East, my expectation for this team, for this division was I would probably see New England atop it, and the Bills probably going to be fighting for second place. The Dolphins would be in third, and the Jets would be in fourth. The reality of the situation is the Bills are actually a really good team. They're 6-2, and while Josh Allen's play has kind of been a little bit inconsistent over these last few weeks, over the last 4 games or so, they are still 6-2. Josh Allen's a top 10 quarterback. This team is firmly in the playoff race, and the only team that's close to them in their division is Miami at 4-3. New England's 2-5. And the Jets are even worse, I think, than we imagined. I think we all thought their record would be bad this season. I actually predicted the Jets to be 0-16. But for them to look as incompetent as they do is just terrible. They've scored 94 points on the season, and they've allowed 238. It's terrible. My expectation was supposed to be Bill Belichick's atop this division, and the Bills would be fighting for second, and it is the Patriots are they might finish with a top 5 pick, a top 10 pick, and the Bills are going to be in the late 20s, and it looks like they're going to win this division. For the AFC West, my expectation, the Chiefs were going to be first. I thought maybe the Chargers would be second, but they could be fighting with Denver, but I didn't buy into the Drew Lock hype as much as everybody else did. I thought the Chargers would be second, and then the Broncos probably be third, and the Raiders would be fourth. Turns out the Chiefs are number 1, but the Raiders are number 2. Right behind them is the Broncos at 3-4, and the Chargers are 2-5. I completely whiffed on the Chargers. I thought with Taylor, they would run a system kind of like the Ravens, except Taylor can pass and he can run. I thought it looked something like Baltimore, and they just didn't do it. They dropped him back like he was Phillip Rivers. And the Raiders are inconsistent. They beat really good teams, and all of a sudden they lose a game you'd think they should win. And Denver has just been battling injuries themselves. It's kind of like the Niners. They have been hurt at every single level of the team. This is just not their year. The Chiefs obviously are basically healthy, and they're fine, and they are rolling. So the Chiefs, they've held up their end of the bargain. The rest of the teams are really messing it up. For the AFC North, I thought going into this season, the Ravens would be number 1, the Browns would be number 2, the Steelers would be number 3, and the Bengals would be number 4. The reality is, the Steelers are 7-0, which I had no clue was going to happen. The Ravens are 5-2 and look vulnerable. Like, they do not look like they're going to finish with a really good record, but I just think this team can be beaten any other day. I think the Ravens can beat anybody, but I also think anybody can really beat the Ravens. If you have a competent quarterback and a competent team, the Ravens can be had. If you can force Lamar Jackson to throw, they can be had. And for the Browns, I'm not really sure what to think. I thought the Browns would finish maybe around 500. I think they still could finish around there, but their run game is outstanding. Their offense is one of the most efficient in the NFL. I love Stefanski. I'm very worried about Baker. And as for the Bengals, they are the best 2-5-1 team I have ever seen, and Joe Burrow was an absolute hit. I had no clue he would be this good, this fast. He is the highest graded quarterback in his division. And I think next season, he will be the dude in that division. It just falls on the Bengals if they're going to actually surround him with the appropriate talent. But again, the Steelers have shocked me. The Ravens have kind of disappointed me. I'm not sure what to make of the Browns. I did not expect them to be 5-3, but they're one of the most kind of inconsistent, weird 5-3 teams I've seen. And the Bengals, I don't know, are they better than their record? I think their play dictates they're better than their record, but, a missed field goal, some unlucky interceptions by Joe Burrow, some rookie interceptions, make some mistakes because he's a young dude. I think he can correct them next year or as the season goes on. But yeah, the AFC North did a complete 180 on me, and I did not see it coming. And then last but not least, the AFC South. I really wasn't sure what to make of this division, because every single year, the teams kind of all hover around each other. They all finish with close to the same record. No one really runs away with the division. It's kind of like the NFC East. The NFC East, whoever runs away with it. When the Cowboys are double-digit win teams, that seems to be the only time it seems like any team runs away with the division is when they hit double-digit wins. Other than that, it's kind of perpetually around like 10-6, 9-7, 8-8. No one ever really separates themselves. And with the AFC South, for these last few years, it's kind of been 9-7, 8-8, 10-6 football teams can win the division, and they all kind of hover around each other. But going into the season, I thought it'd be Tennessee would take the lead, I thought the Texans would be second, I thought the Colts would be third, and I thought Jacksonville would be fourth. I guess the thing is that I thought all the teams would be close to each other. I thought their record would all be maybe a game, 2 games, 3 games would separate them all. I did not expect to see the Texans and Jags tied for last in the division at 1-6, and I didn't expect to see the Titans and Colts tied for first at 5-2. Right now, Titans are ahead. Right now, they're technically in first. But the Colts have been way better than I thought they would be. Their defense is number one, or at least it was number one in the NFL for like the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. It's been great. Rivers is a bit inconsistent, but the offensive line has really helped him out. They've been banged up a bit at running back and at wide receiver. I think Phillip Rivers probably isn't their quarterback next year. I think they're going to move in another direction. I'm interested to see if they try and trade for Sam Darnold, because I think Sam Darnold with the Colts would make them a contender. I think this Colts team is literally a quarterback away from being a true contender. Tennessee, yeah, they're top of the division. I just think they're frauds. I thought they'd be a Super Bowl threat. I think they're frauds because their defense just isn't good enough. And then Houston's just been an absolute disappointment to me. Even with Deshaun Watson, they're 1-6. They've just been absolutely disappointing. And for Jacksonville, the week 1, I thought they were actually going to be pretty decent. They have since then lost 6 straight. And while they have been competitive in some of these games, it has not been pretty. And their next game, Gardner Minshew is not going to be the starter. So, the Jacksonville's going to finish with like the number 2, number 3 overall pick. They will have a shot at drafting a top quarterback. So that is my expectations versus reality for the AFC. Now let's go to the NFC. Let's start with the NFC East. So when I looked at the NFC East, again, I kind of looked at it like the AFC South. All these teams kind of hover around each other. They beat up on each other. Other teams beat up on them. And I thought it would be close. But ultimately, I thought that Philadelphia would be able to win this division because I looked at Dak Prescott last year with this team, and it was basically the same team minus CeeDee Lamb, and obviously a new head coach. But I looked at it and I said, I mean, for all the talent, they had the number 1 offense in the NFL, and their defense was bad, and it only got worse, and offensively, they put up all those numbers, and they still went 8-8. So I didn't have faith in the Cowboys. I thought the Cowboys would take second, because I thought they'd be better than Washington and better than the Giants. I thought the Giants would take third, and Washington would be fourth. Reality kicked in, and the Eagles are first at 3-4-1. Not what I thought they'd be. Washington is in second at 2-5. Wow. The Cowboys are 2-6 in third, and the Giants are bringing up the rear end at 1-7, and they might be the best 1-7 team I've ever seen in my life. They compete every single game, and if Daniel Jones wasn't a turnover machine, I think the Giants would have at least maybe 2 or 3 more wins. So, yeah, this division, it did not turn out to be what I thought it would be. The Eagles have been an injury-riddled mess and aren't really good in any position on the team. Their offensive line's banged up, their receiving core's banged up, the running backs, the tight ends, everything on this team is banged up. For Washington, they benched their starting quarterback, bring in Kyle Allen. They think they can have a real shot to win this division, and I can't say they're wrong. The Cowboys, they lose Dak. Their whole offensive line is basically gone. Their defense has been lacking in effort all season long. DeMarcus Lawrence has finally kind of come on strong. I think right now they have him as like the 3rd graded defensive lineman by Pro Football Focus. And then the Giants, they play hard. Every single game, they play hard. Joe Judge looks like he can coach. Their defense looks solid, needs a few more pieces, but other than that, it looks really good. And the question around that team is Daniel Jones. Do they move forward with him? Can they control his turnover problem? What do they do? No clue. But yeah, the NFC East, I did not think it would be this weak this season. Let's go to the NFC West. Going into the season, I thought the Niners would be number 1. I thought the Rams would be number 2. I thought the Seahawks would be number 3. And the Cardinals would be number 4. I was trying to be realistic. I looked at the I looked at the 49ers and I said their whole team is basically there. And their team isn't really predicated on the receivers. It's the run game, it's the offensive line, it's the defense. The team is there. So I thought the Niners would once again run away, and they would be able to basically run their way to victory, even with a tougher schedule. They would run their way to victory, play great defense, and they would be the top team again. When I looked at the Seahawks, I looked at their defense and I just said, no pass rush. I mean, Wagner's there, but he kind of had a bit of a down year. The secondary, I don't know. I think the secondary is going to be the strong point of their defense, but their offensive system, they don't let Russ cook. They're going to try and run the football, and they're going to fail, and the team's going to get romped. Like, this defense, I don't think it's going to be good enough, and they're going to handicap Russell Wilson, and they're not going to let him be what he should be, and it's going to be a terrible season. And then as for the Cardinals, I just looked at them and said, I mean, last year they weren't good. I don't think they're going to be great this year. The defense isn't great. Kyler Murray, it's year number 2. He's more of a runner than a thrower. We'll see what happens. And then for the Rams, I looked at them and I said, hey, Sean McVay, I think last year kind of shocked him. I don't think he expected the offensive line to be that bad. And obviously they were dealing with some injuries here and there. Todd Gurley wasn't the same. They got rid of him. Brandon Cooks is gone. So now it's Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, the 2 tight ends. And obviously the Rams have been what they are. Reality kicks in. The Niners are a banged-up mess, and they're pulling up the rear of the division, and I think they will finish in last place. The Rams are an inconsistent 5-3 team that beat up on the NFC East, and outside of that, they are 1-4 outside of the NFC East. The Cardinals' defense is surprisingly good. They lost Chandler Jones, which sucks for them, because it's a big hit to their defense, and I think that will be a thing that really does swing their defense. Their defense could have been probably close to top 10 because it's great against points. It's great at keeping opponents out of the end zone, but now they don't have a pass rush. And for Seattle, they're 6-1 because of Russell Wilson. They are a call away from being 7-0. It's crazy. I did not see that happening. I thought they would handicap Russell Wilson. They've let him cook. Seattle's one of the best teams in the NFC East. I think they're one of the best teams in the NFL. I don't think their defense is good enough to win a Super Bowl right now. We'll see what happens when they get Snacks and Jamal Adams back, and obviously Carlos Dunlap. We'll see what happens there, but as it stands right now, they are the best team in the NFC West, and I am curious to see how this all unfolds as the season goes on. Let's go to the NFC North. I thought that the Packers would take the lead. I thought the Packers would be number 1. I thought the Vikings would be number 2. I thought the Lions would be number 3, and the Bears would be number 4. Or give or take, flip the Bears and the Lions. 3 or 4, you can kind of flip them back and forth. I wasn't really sure on either of those teams, but I thought the Packers would be number 1, and the Vikings would be number 2. My goodness. The Packers are number 1, and Aaron Rodgers has turned back the hands of time. The Bears are surprisingly second in the division at 5-3. They're the most phony 5-3 team of all time. Okay, maybe not realistically, but they are a phony 5-3 team. I don't believe in them to do anything in the playoffs, even if they do make it. And at this rate, I don't know if they are going to make it. They're so challenged offensively. It is all defense, and Matt Nagy especially, he's supposed to be this genius offensive play caller. His first year with Trubisky, things looked great. These past 2 seasons, where's the creativity? Where is any of it? I don't see the creativity in anything they do offensively. It looks like a standard, predictable offense. I don't know what to make of it. And for the Lions, they're kind of the Lions. They have a really talented offense. Don't really know much about, their defense is It's kind of a bleh team. They're 3-4, nothing really to talk about. And then the Vikings, for them to be 2-5, I just didn't see it coming. And Kirk Cousins has been a turnover machine this year. They beat the Packers, giving the ball to Dalvin Cook, both on the ground and through the air. They don't trust Kirk Cousins to throw it. They just don't. This season has not been Kirk Cousins' year. So I did not expect this division to pan out this way. I thought the Packers would be first, but for the Bears and Lions to both be ahead of the Vikings thus far blows my mind. I did not see that coming. And last but not least, the NFC South. Heading into the season, I thought the Saints were by far and away going to run away with this division because of what I've seen them do the past 3 years, which is run away with the division. I thought the Buccaneers would be second because their offense was too good and their defense was too good for them to be lower than the Panthers and Falcons. I thought the Falcons would take third because, again, the offensive firepower, I thought they'd be too good there. Their defense, I thought it'd be bad, so I thought they would be a worse off team, but I thought they'd at least be better than the Panthers. The Panthers I thought they'd be fourth because I didn't trust Teddy Bridgewater to do much, and their defense I didn't think it'd be good, nor did I think their offense would, and sure enough, the Buccaneers are first at 6-2. The Saints are a very bad 5-2 team. Drew Brees looks old. The defense doesn't look good, and I'm kind of shocked that they're 5-2. The Panthers 3-5. That's better than I thought they'd be. They have surprised me this season. And then for the Falcons, they're just a mess. They lose games in the strangest of fashions. You give up a 3-touchdown lead against the Bears to Nick Foles. You didn't jump on an onside kick because you didn't know you could. And then you scored too quickly against the Lions. And you let Matt Stafford drive down the field with a minute left and one timeout. And you lost all of those games. Just terrible. If they had those 3 wins, this team right now would be 5-3. And they'd be in third place. And they would be fighting to actually try and get a wild card spot. 3 losses that could have all been wins, could have completely changed how we looked at this team this year. This has not been a good season for the Falcons again, and obviously they fired their head coach, I think they fired their GM, and it's rebuild time. The Buccaneers have surprised me. I didn't think they'd be this good this quickly. I think they are by far and away the best team. I know that them and the Saints are going to face off again. I do not expect the Saints to win that game, and I don't really expect them to even look competitive. I think there's a great chance the Buccaneers steamroll them, and for the Panthers, I think they're in a really good rebuilding mode, and I gotta be honest, with what I've seen from Teddy Bridgewater, if you can surround him with a few more pieces, get him more familiar with the system, maybe put a good defense there, Teddy Bridgewater can maybe take this team to the playoffs, and they could maybe be a legitimate contender, because he has looked way better than I have ever seen him look before. I got to give it up to their head coach. Rookie head coach, first time with Teddy Bridgewater, they look like a real team. But yeah, I did not expect the NFC South to be the Buccaneers basically to lose. I did not expect that. Hope you're all doing well. Hope everyone's anxiety has calmed down. I hope the earth doesn't burn down over the next week or so, week and a half. I hope everyone is okay, and cheers to another day. Anyways, thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us out. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.